Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's John here with Cine Park Rangers, and we've got a pretty fun one for you guys today. But before we jump into it, if you don't mind hitting the subscribe button, clicking like on this video, and comment down below what your thoughts on it are, we'd really appreciate it. Okay, so initially when I was considering making this video and writing the script and all those sorts of things, I originally was going to discuss Pixar's relationship with Disney, a little bit of the history behind that, how it's sort of evolved over the years, what Pixar's involvement in the parks has been over the years, a lot of stuff like that, right? Well, the more that I sat and thought about it, I think that the crux of what I'm getting to in this video is that animation is changing as a whole. That said though, I would like to start this video off by sort of juxtaposing Pixar as the pinnacle of animation, if you will. For a long time, Pixar has held that rank. They've been the highest quality animated studio in cinema history for decades at this point. But that's now changed, I think. And I think that that's maybe the more interesting piece about Pixar these days. So let's get into it, shall we? Okay, so let's start off by discussing Disney and Pixar's relationship, which I do think is kind of important. Originally, Disney and Pixar signed a co-production deal in 1991 to produce 3 films, one of which was Toy Story. And Toy Story would ultimately release in 1995, which led to another deal in 1997 between the two studios that would allow for production of 5 more movies over the next 10 years. However, in 2006, Disney would end up merging with Pixar, which allowed them to keep their competitive edge in the animated space. You see, Disney was a little worried about their 2D animation at the time, and Pixar was the answer to that problem. So obviously, Disney has since adopted that 3D animated style for their own proprietary productions. Examples like Tangled, Frozen, Encanto, most recently Raya and the Last Dragon. A lot of these animated films have done pretty well for Disney. So what's going on with Pixar then? Why does it seem like Pixar makes mediocre films at best and downright boring films at the worst? And also, why aren't they making any money? Let's actually look at the profitability of some of Pixar's movies as of late. I'm going to start from the bottom and go to the top. We're going to skip a little bit at the end, but you'll see where I'm headed with this. All right, so coming in at number 27, we have Turning Red, which made $20.1 million in 2022. At number 26, we have Luca, which made $49.8 million in 2022, and it had a budget of around $160 million. We're already off to a great start, yeah? At number 25, there's Soul, which made $121 million in 2020. At 24, we've got Onward, which made $142 million in 2020. At 23, we've got Lightyear, which made $226.4 million in 2022, and it had a budget of about $200 million. And you know what? Why don't we go ahead and just stop there for a second? Obviously, the pandemic is a factor when it comes to some of these Pixar releases. So Soul, which did release in 2020, released straight to Disney Plus with no premiere access. I don't know if you guys remember that, but when the pandemic hit, we had this premiere access thing that like Black Widow and several other films went through, which had a quasi-theatrical release at some point, and then also a straight to Disney Plus release as well for a premium rental, essentially. But at any rate, Soul would be the first to go straight to Disney Plus. Luca would follow suit on June 18th, 2021, and Turning Red would be the last straight to Disney Plus release in March of 2022. Now, Turning Red is an interesting one because movies were back in the theaters. People were going to the movies again. It's an interesting choice for Disney to just shove a project like Turning Red straight to Disney Plus when it's a Pixar film, which Pixar is their premier animated studio, isn't it? And what's interesting is later that year, Lightyear would be the first Pixar film to go back into theaters from Disney, and it barely even made its budget back. And after you factor in marketing costs, it didn't make any money for Pixar. So what's the issue then? Truthfully, I think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that Pixar just isn't as innovative as it once was in terms of its storytelling and in terms of its characters. I think that a lot of Pixar's original films as of late hit similar beats to other original films, or they're just shameless sequels to movies that they had a while ago that ended up doing really well for them and being very profitable. Toy Story is a prime example of that. In 2019, Toy Story 4 made Disney $1 billion. And in 2018, The Incredibles 2 made Disney $1.2 billion. Granted, both of those are before 2020 and the pandemic and everything. However, I think that there's still a case to be made that other films that came out close to that time that were originals didn't make them nearly as much money. For example, The Good Dinosaur only made Disney about $330 million in 2015. I think it's also worth mentioning just real fast that I haven't adjusted any of these revenues for inflation or anything like that, so sort of bear that in mind as I'm talking about the numbers and everything, but they're not so far apart that it would be vastly different today or anything. But to get back into it a little bit, I really do think that a lot of the problems that Pixar is having right now has less to do with the fact that people aren't interested in Pixar. It doesn't have much to do with the fact that people just aren't interested in original content. I think if anything, people are hungering for original content. I think that especially something like Barbie and Oppenheimer doing as well as they did in the middle of the summer this year compared to movies like The Flash or Transformers, even Fast and Furious, there's a sensational itch to watch original content. And Pixar should be leading the charge on that. It's what they've specialized in for years, and it's really at the core of their identity, or at least it was in the early days. Now we have films like Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, or Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, or even the latest Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie that are all outshining Pixar in terms of the freshness with their animation, the likable characters that they have, the depth that they give their stories, all this sort of stuff makes an impact, I think. And it's not to say that Pixar hasn't put out good films in the last 10 years. I don't think that that's true at all. I actually really enjoyed Onward. I actually really enjoyed Coco. I really enjoyed Luca. But when you get to something like Lightyear, you have a character that's ripped out of a franchise that ultimately is carrying Pixar in a lot of ways, and you've changed his voice. You've crafted a story that doesn't carry any weight or will hold no real stake when you throw it into the mix with the other 4 installments of Toy Story. It just sort of feels like it's kind of there. No one really asked for it, but you know, there it is. In Turning Red, while I can appreciate the originality they were going for with that one, the characters are a little bit insufferable. That's my opinion. You're welcome to disagree with it, but I just feel like the messaging wasn't as strong as it typically is. I get that also that movie may not just be for me personally. It may just not be for, you know, a nearly 30-year-old white guy. Get it, understand. However, I still think that Pixar's strength back in the day was being able to appeal to almost everybody. And that's what I feel Spider-Verse is doing, and Puss in Boots did, and Ninja Turtles did. I bring those 3 up because they're recent animated movies that are really raising the bar and elevating what it means for a film to be not just good animation, but a good story as well. Ninja Turtles is all about family. It was so good. It was so well crafted. You really felt like they were brothers that were in high school trying to figure things out. And it's a grounded story. It's not this crazy world-ending thing that gets wildly existential. It's just about brothers trying to take care of each other and a dad trying to learn how to navigate letting go of his sons and giving them their independence while still being a good dad. Spider-Verse is all about navigating what it looks like to be different in a world where there are a lot of people like you, but you're not playing by their rules necessarily. And Puss in Boots teaches kids that while death comes for us all, it's not good to fixate on death, but it's good to learn how to live well in the moment. These are all core things that I feel like Pixar used to do really, really well, and it almost feels like cheap now when you watch a Pixar movie in terms of the emotion that it's trying to invoke out of you, right? Soul kind of felt that way to me. As much as I loved Soul, and I really did, I enjoyed it a lot, it just felt like, oh yeah, this is going to be one where I'm going to cry. Of course. Onward, I think, is the best case recently that Pixar has done where it handled that sort of thing very, very well. It handled loss really well, and it handled brotherhood really well, and overall just learning to be brave and adventurous when maybe that's not your inclination. I think the crux of this animation issue that I'm getting at has less to do with Pixar itself and more to do with filmmaking in general right now. I'm thankful that the bar has been elevated by other production companies right now in animation studios to craft stories that are going to resonate with younger audiences, older audiences, and transcend the bounds of time because the messages are timeless. I think that audiences right now are completely worn out on sequels and reboots and remakes and all these sorts of things. There's a real hunger and longing for original content. So I think that my purpose in making this video is to say Pixar should get back to that. They should stop trying to pander to what they feel like people want to see, what they feel like is going to work, what's going to be the most indignant piece of animated history, and focus on what are folks going through that work at Pixar? What are your writers going through? What are your animators going through? What's the real life elements of the people that work for your company that you could write stories off of? It's a good time to be a film fan, honestly. I think we're at a renaissance right now where we're getting away from the sort of franchise thing and we're moving towards more standalone movies and TV shows. But I want to know what you think. Are animated movies still relevant? Do you love Pixar? Do you hate Pixar right now? Did you used to love Pixar and now you don't like Pixar? Did you used to hate Pixar and now you love Pixar? What are your thoughts on the latest DreamWorks stuff and Sony animated stuff? Let us know down in the comments below. And once again, if you like this video, please consider hitting the subscribe button, click like on this video, and we'll catch you in the next one.